Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we really get into some profound ideas, try to pull out the core insights, and make them clear for you.
And some books, they don't just give you information, do they? They actually change how you see things.
Exactly. They offer this deep shift in perspective. They show you parts of being human you maybe never even thought about. And today, we are diving deep into one of those books, a real giant. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh, it's definitely one of those. It's not a book you just read and, put back on the shelf. It sticks with you.
Right.
And what makes it so powerful, I think, is that it's two things at once. It's this absolutely harrowing Holocaust memoir, his first-hand story. But then, incredibly, it's also the foundation for a whole school of psychology.
That combination is just unique. So our mission today is to unpack Frankl's unbelievable journey, his powerful ideas. We want to help you, listening, really grasp logotherapy, what it is, and why it feels so relevant, maybe even more relevant right now.
And everything we're talking about, it's pulled straight from the sources, from the book itself. We've really tried to dive into it to get the essence.
So let's set the scene a bit. Viktor Frankl, he was a psychiatrist, a doctor specializing in the mind, and he somehow survived Auschwitz, other Nazi camps.
Which is just staggering to comprehend. So his book, it describes unimaginable suffering, but it's way more than just that. It's this deep exploration of how you find purpose inside that suffering, even when everything tells you there's no hope left.
And that's the amazing thing, how he weaves these two journeys together. On one side, there's his own horrific experience, being stripped of literally everything: name, family, freedom, dignity, just raw survival.
And then, like you said, woven right through that, he's developing logotherapy, his psychological approach. And the core idea is that our main drive as humans isn't pleasure, isn't power. It's the search for meaning.
And it wasn't just some theory he cooked up in an office, right? It was forged in that absolute hell.
Exactly. The two parts aren't just side by side. They feed each other. His agony, the suffering he saw and lived through, that became the testing ground for his ideas. It's not abstract theory. It's grounded in real human desperation and, resilience too.
So this deep dive, we're going to see how meaning can be found even in the absolute worst circumstances.
And crucially, how that wisdom connects to the challenges we face. Maybe not concentration camps, thank goodness, but, burnout, loss, feeling adrift. Those everyday struggles, it gets to the heart of human resilience.
It really does. Okay, so let's step into Frankl's world. Let's start with the camps themselves, that unimaginable crucible. Frankl, using his psychiatrist's perspective, saw the prisoner's experience unfolding in three distinct psychological phases.
Yeah.
And the first one is just brutal. Admission. It's marked by shock, total disbelief.
Right. Admission wasn't just arriving somewhere awful. It was this complete shattering of your inner world instantly. Imagine being crammed in a cattle car, totally lost, and then boom, separated from everyone. Life or death decided in seconds.
Arbitrarily.
Completely arbitrarily. A guard's glance, a whim, no logic, no justice. Any idea you had about order or fairness from your old life, just gone, vaporized in an instant. Yeah. That immediate powerlessness was the first psychological blow.
It's almost impossible to really wrap your head around that kind of immediate total loss. Frankl talks about men being stripped of their names.
By a number.
Yeah, their belongings, their dignity, everything that made them an individual. Gone. It wasn't just physical control, it was designed to break the spirit, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Systematic dehumanization. Reducing a person to less than human, to a number. It aims straight for the psyche.
And the mind's reaction to that. Frankl observed this overwhelming numbness, denial.
It's a defense mechanism, right? The shock is too huge, too sudden. Losing every single anchor to your past life all at once. The mind just sort of shuts down parts of itself to cope. Like waking up in a nightmare you can't escape from.
Numbness as a buffer against just breaking completely.
Yeah, a brutal form of self-preservation. Allowing the horror in, but maybe in smaller doses, just to survive that initial impact.
And out of this comes one of Frankl's most chilling insights, I think. He says, the best of us did not return. What's beneath that statement? It's more than just sadness.
Oh, much more. It implies that often the people with the strongest moral compass, those who really held on to their values, their ethics, paradoxically, they might not have physically survived.
Why? Because they wouldn't compromise. They wouldn't adapt to the moral wasteland of the camp.
Possibly. Maybe they were too unbending. Their acts of selflessness, their refusal to play the brutal survival game, might have made them more vulnerable. They couldn't or wouldn't make the compromises needed just to get through another day.
So while their spirit might have been incredible, inspiring even.
Their physical bodies didn't make it. But Frankl suggests their spirit, their example, was carried by those who did survive.
Which raises this really tough question, doesn't it? What kind of strength actually led to survival there? Was it pure physical strength? Or was it something else, a different kind of resilience?
Maybe a more complex, even morally ambiguous resilience. The ability to adapt, to perhaps numb oneself enough, to focus just on the next crust of bread, the next moment, even if it meant letting go of certain ideals temporarily.
It suggests a different kind of heroism, just in the act of enduring. Surviving when survival itself seemed impossible.
Exactly. It asks that uncomfortable question. Does extreme suffering sometimes require a certain, maybe harsh, pragmatism? A level of detachment just to keep going physically? It's a profound ethical knot tied up in the very act of staying alive.
Okay, so from that initial shock, that first phase, Frankl says survivors moved into the second phase. This was the long haul. Apathy, an emotional death. This was the daily grind of camp life.
Yeah, once the shock wore off, this deep emotional numbness became the norm. Like psychological armor, the constant hunger, the beatings, death being everywhere, seeing horrific things every single day.
It stopped being shocking.
It became commonplace, mundane almost. The mind retreated, built this wall of apathy. Because feeling everything, all the time, that would lead to instant breakdown. Apathy was terrible, but necessary for psychological survival in that context.
In this apathy, it even affected relationships. Frankl noted that real friendships were rare, maybe even dangerous.
Precisely. Survival often boiled down to looking out for number one. Resources were beyond scarce a bit of bread, a slightly better place to sleep. Trust. That was a massive risk. A bond could mean sharing scarce resources, or worse, betrayal if someone's survival depended on it.
Yet, even in that emotional wasteland, Frankl points out these small, almost absurd pleasures that took on huge significance.
Yes, like finding a cigarette butt someone dropped, or getting an extra bit of watery soup. He writes about these moments with such clarity.
And these weren't about comfort as we know it, right? They were tiny symbols. Luck. Hope, maybe. A flicker of control in a world with none.
Exactly. Proof that life, even that miserable existence, still had some randomness, some tiny possibility. It really does make you reconsider complaining about, the Wi-Fi being slow.
Doesn't it just, my coffee machine breaking seems trivial.
Totally puts things in perspective. And observing this is what leads directly to Frankl's huge insight, the seed of logotherapy. He noticed something critical.
What was that?
That the people who had a powerful reason to live a why tended to endure longer.
Reason like what?
Could be anything deeply personal, a specific goal, like finishing a piece of work, the burning hope of seeing a child again, a deeply held belief, religious or philosophical, even a scientific task they felt they had to complete or report on.
So their suffering, as immense as it wasn't just empty pain. It had a point, a future direction.
Exactly. It was connected to a why. It had a purpose, even if the how, the daily reality, was unbearable. This is the absolute pivot point.
Moving from just observing suffering to understanding the key to enduring it.
Yes. Frankl saw that suffering without that why, without meaning, led to emotional collapse, to giving up, often long before the body failed physically. Despair, nihilism, the feeling that the agony was pointless that broke people.
And that's where he brings in that incredibly powerful quote.
Those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? But the implications are just massive for anyone facing hardship.
So if you have that deep reason, that purpose bigger than the immediate pain, you can withstand almost anything.
It shifts the power. From being crushed by external conditions, which you often can't control, to drawing on your internal resolve, your meaning. That's the freedom you still have.
Think about athletes pushing through pain for a dream, or a parent sacrificing for a child.
Or even someone just dedicating themselves to a craft, finding meaning in the work itself. The how, the difficulty, the sacrifice, the lack of immediate reward becomes bearable, even significant, because it's anchored to that compelling why.
It transforms suffering from pointless agony
into a necessary part of a purposeful journey. And that understanding, born in the absolute worst conditions imaginable, becomes the foundation of his whole psychology. Our greatest power lies in our attitude towards what we can't change.
Okay, then the third phase Frankl identifies. This one feels really counterintuitive. Liberation. You'd expect pure joy, right? Relief, celebration. But it wasn't like that for many.
No, not at all. Instead of that expected explosion of joy, what often happened was more numbness. The ability to feel intense positive emotion, elation, it seemed like it had been burned out of them, or at least deeply suppressed by years of trauma.
It's like the emotional circuits were just overloaded or shut down.
Right. There was this profound disorientation. Freedom itself could feel like this huge, terrifying void. The brutal rules of the camp were gone, but what replaced them? They didn't know how to be free anymore.
And mixed in with that numbness were other difficult emotions too. Bitterness.
Definitely bitterness. Towards a world that couldn't possibly grasp what they'd been through. How could anyone understand? It created this huge gap. And maybe even worse, this crushing guilt.
Survivor's guilt.
Yeah, that awful question. Why me? Why did I survive when so many others, maybe better people, didn't? It's a question with no answer. And it became this heavy shadow for many, long after they were physically free.
So getting out wasn't the end of the struggle. Healing was another journey entirely.
A long, slow, incredibly hard journey. Frankl talks about survivors having to relearn basic human things we just take for granted. How to trust again, how to be intimate, how to feel pleasure or even sadness without it being overwhelming, how to feel normally.
And some never fully made it back psychologically.
Tragically, no. The trauma was too deep. What's so striking about this phase is that liberation itself presented a new challenge. It wasn't about fighting external oppression anymore. It was about rebuilding a shattered internal world.
It shows that freedom alone isn't enough, right? Without meaning, without a sense of self, freedom can be almost as terrifying as captivity.
It's exactly a void. Which leads us perfectly into the second part of the book where Frankl lays out his answer. Logotherapy.
Right, his school of psychology, born from everything he saw and experienced. So let's start basic. What is logotherapy at its core?
Okay, so the absolute core idea is that our deepest motivation as humans is the search for meaning. That's the primary drive. Frankl really set this apart from Freud, who focused on the drive for pleasure.
The pleasure principle.
Right, and from Adler, who focused on the drive for power or superiority. Frankl said, sure, those drives exist, but they're secondary. The most fundamental human need, the thing that gives life direction and resilience, is finding meaning. The logos meaning is what truly drives us.
And a key difference from other therapies is its focus, right? It's very forward-looking.
Absolutely. Many therapies spend a lot of time digging into the past childhood, traumas to understand the present, which can be valuable, of course. But logotherapy's main question isn't what past event made you this way. It's more like, okay, given where you are now, what meaning can you find? What is life asking of you today? What responsibility is waiting for you?
It sounds very action-oriented. Empowering.
It is. It shifts the focus from feeling like a victim of your past to being an active agent in your present and future. It prompts you, the listener, to think. When you're facing something tough, are you mostly looking back, trying to figure out why, or are you looking forward, asking, what can I create from this? What meaning can I build now? That future pull is central.
So how do we find this meaning? Frankl, drawing on everything he saw, identified three main ways, three pathways. The first one is maybe the most straightforward, through work or deeds.
Yeah. This is about engaging with the world, creating things, taking on tasks, solving problems, contributing something, using your unique skills and efforts to make a mark, basically.
But it doesn't have to be some huge world-changing thing.
Not at all. That's key. It could be the dedication of a craftsman perfecting their skill, a teacher finding meaning in helping students learn, someone tending a garden meticulously, a parent raising a child. It's about the act of creation, of contribution, of doing something well and taking responsibility for it, putting yourself into something outside yourself. That act itself brings purpose. You see the result of your effort.
Makes sense. The second pathway is through love, experiencing something or encountering someone.
Yes, love. Frankl had a very profound view of love. He believed it's the only way we can truly grasp another person in their deepest potential.
How so?
When you genuinely love someone, a partner, a child, a friend, humanity even, you see beyond their surface flaws or limitations. You see their unique essence, their inherent worth, their potential, and in seeing it, you actually help them become it. Love affirms and enables the other person's potential.
So it's not just a feeling, it's an act of seeing and enabling.
Exactly. And in doing that, in focusing on the value and potential of another, you transcend your own self-interest. You find meaning in nurturing, supporting, valuing someone else. It connects you to something larger than just your own needs and desires. It's about recognizing that unique spark in another and helping it shine.
Okay, and the third pathway. This is maybe the toughest, given Frankl's context. Finding meaning through suffering.
Right, and this needs care. Frankl is not saying suffering is good or that we should seek it out. That would be perverse.
No, of course not.
His point is about unavoidable suffering, situations you cannot change, an incurable illness, a loss you can't reverse, being subjected to forces beyond your control, like in the camps. When you face that kind of inescapable suffering, that presents an opportunity.
An opportunity for what?
For growth, for finding meaning in the suffering itself. It comes down to the attitude you choose to take towards that suffering, the stand you take. And here's another one of his incredibly powerful lines. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves.
So the meaning isn't in the suffering itself, but in our response to it. It shifts the focus from the external, uncontrollable event to our internal, controllable reaction.
Precisely. That's the key. You can't change the fact of the suffering, but you can choose how you bear it. You can find meaning in enduring with dignity, in learning from it, in maintaining your inner freedom, in helping others even while you suffer.
Like Frankl himself finding meaning in planning to rewrite his manuscript or trying to help fellow prisoners mentally.
Exactly. Or others finding meaning in holding on to a memory, a faith, or even just the tiny act of sharing a crumb of bread when they had nothing. These internal choices, these attitudes, they transformed meaningless agony into something else, into a testament to the human spirit. It was the only freedom left, and for many, it was the difference between survival and despair.
Wow. Okay, so moving on from how we find meaning, Frankl also warned about something he saw developing in modern society. He called it the existential vacuum. Sounds pretty bleak.
It's a really insightful concept. And yeah, it sounds bleak, but it feels incredibly relevant today. Frankl noticed that traditional structures, things like strong religious beliefs, clear social roles, community traditions, which used to provide people with a built-in sense of meaning and direction, were fading.
People weren't being told what to do or what to believe quite so clearly anymore.
Exactly. More freedom, in a way, but also less guidance. So without those external frameworks, and if people don't actively develop their own sense of purpose, they can fall into this void, this existential vacuum. It manifests as boredom, a feeling of aimlessness, anxiety, a sense that life lacks meaning, even if materially they have everything.
A kind of spiritual emptiness despite outward success.
Precisely. And Frankl saw real consequences stemming from this vacuum. It wasn't just a philosophical problem.
What kind of consequences?
He linked it directly to increases in things like depression, aggression, and addiction. People trying desperately to fill that inner void with something, anything. Temporary thrills, substances, obsessive work, consumerism, seeking constant external validation.
Like self-medicating a lack of meaning?
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
He saw these as symptoms of that deeper hunger for purpose. And it really makes you look around today, doesn't it? With mental health crises, the search for validation online, burnout. Frankl seemed to foresee this sense of drift, this search for something more, long before our current digital age intensified it. It prompts you, the listener, to ask, do you see that vacuum, that search, in the world or even in yourself?
It's a sobering thought. So if that's the problem, how does logotherapy actually help? In practice, how does it combat this vacuum?
Well, it works on a few levels. First, it directly helps people find meaning, even in difficult situations like we discussed, turning suffering into growth, finding the logos and the pathos, the meaning in the suffering.
Okay.
Second, it really pushes individuals to take responsibility for their lives and choices. It hammers home that even when things are tough, your response is yours. You have agency.
Shifting away from feeling like a victim.
Exactly. Replacing that sense of victimhood, life is happening to me, with a sense of purpose and agency, I can respond meaningfully to life. It empowers people to transcend their circumstances instead of being defined by them. It's about moving from why me to, okay, what now? What meaning can I make here?
Which brings us to the core tenets of logotherapy, the foundational ideas that make it unique.
Right. There are a few key ones. First, the power of choice in every situation. Even when everything external seems determined, your freedom to choose your attitude remains. Frankl lived this. He chose how he would mentally and spiritually respond to the horrors around him.
That inner freedom.
The ultimate freedom. Second, it emphasizes future-oriented thinking. It actively encourages looking forward. What meaning waits for you? What task is calling you? What potential can you realize? It pulls you out of despair by giving you something to aim for.
Not just dwelling on the past.
No. The past informs, but the future motivates. And finally, maybe the most powerful idea, the freedom of will, even in constraint. This is where the human spirit really shows itself. Even with zero physical freedom, the inner freedom to choose your response persists.
Like those prisoners sharing bread or offering comfort.
Exactly. Those weren't just random acts. They were profound choices, assertions of dignity and humanity born from that inner freedom. It shows that consciousness, the human spirit, can't be totally enslaved. It can always choose its stance. That's the ultimate resilience.
These ideas, born from such darkness, lead us naturally into the enduring wisdom, the philosophical legacy Frankl left us. One of the most powerful messages is simply that meaning is always possible. That feels almost radically optimistic.
It is radical, especially considering the source. But that's why it hits so hard. Frankl insists that life never stops having potential meaning. Even facing death, even in the absolute pits, the possibility is there. It's inherent in life itself, waiting for us to find it or create it. It's a direct challenge to any idea that life can become truly meaningless.
And tied to that is the idea we just touched on. Attitude is the ultimate freedom.
Yes, his famous quote. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms to choose one's attitude. It puts the power squarely back in our hands. We can't always control what happens to us, but we always control how we respond. That inner stance, that's our unassailable territory.
Frankl also proposed this big shift in perspective about how we approach life itself, asking a different question.
Right. He suggests we stop asking, what do I want from life? Which can lead down a rabbit hole of chasing pleasure or status. Instead, he urges us to ask, what is life asking of me?
Flipping the script completely.
Totally. It puts responsibility, responsiveness right at the center. Meaning isn't something you just find, like lost keys. It's something you create by responding to life's demands, its questions, its challenges. It's about engagement, contribution, answering the call of the situation you're in.
His writing is just packed with these quotes that stop you in your tracks. Let's look at a couple more. Suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning.
Again, not saying the pain vanishes, but the experience transforms. When suffering has a point, a purpose, a why, whether it's growth, learning, bearing witness, helping others, it's no longer just pointless agony. It becomes part of a larger narrative. It changes from purely destructive to potentially transformative.
And the one about happiness. Happiness cannot be pursued. It must ensue. That really cuts against the modern grain, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. We're constantly told to chase happiness, buy happiness, achieve happiness. Frankl, having seen all that crumble, says happiness is a byproduct. It's what happens when you're living meaningfully engaged in a cause, loving someone, taking responsibility. It follows purpose. It doesn't lead. Chasing it directly is often like trying to grab smoke.
Which leads back to maybe his most fundamental statement connecting suffering and meaning. Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose.
This really ties it all together, doesn't it? It links his observations in the camps, seeing people give up, not just physically, but spiritually, when they lost meaning, directly to his core logotherapy principle and the danger of the existential vacuum.
He saw people endure the absolute worst if they had that why.
Exactly. A hope, a task, a love, a responsibility. And conversely, he saw how even relative comfort can feel unbearable if life feels empty, pointless. It's a direct challenge. If life feels unbearable, the solution might not be changing the outside, but finding the meaning on the inside.
So bringing this all together, why does this book, written decades ago about horrific experiences, still resonate so strongly today? It feels like an antidote to so much modern angst, nihilism, burnout, that feeling of being adrift.
I think because in our world, which is often noisy, distracting, full of pressure and comparison, Frankl cuts through it all. He reminds us that meaning is personal, it's accessible, it's internal. It's not about chasing the next big thing, but about living with responsibility, courage, compassion, right where you are. It calls us back to cultivating that inner depth, that sense of purpose, which is maybe what we're collectively starved for.
So as we close, we want to leave you, our listener, with something to really think about, a challenge drawn from Frankl's work. Consider a difficult situation in your own life right now.
Could be big or small.
A
frustration, a challenge, a loss, a period of uncertainty.
Okay, got it in mind.
Now, instead of just asking, how do I get out of this? Or why is this happening to me? Try asking Frankl's question. What is life demanding from me in this moment? What meaning can I find or create within this challenge?
How can I respond purposefully, even if the situation itself is difficult or painful? Because as Viktor Frankl concluded, based on everything he endured and learned, man is not destroyed by suffering, he is destroyed by suffering without meaning. Something profound to mull over and maybe, just maybe, to change how you face your own challenges.